welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. I'm your host Jamie, I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Yeah, you are.
Sure are. Listen, patreon.com/20 Minute Tims. If you enjoy what we do and you want extra podcasts, extra videos, extra rating from us, you can check that out at patreon.com/20 Minute Tims. You can support the podcast, keep the lights on, keep the equipment going, and get extra content for yourself. Check that out. Right, that is the business out the way. And now we can get to the real business of talking about Glasgow Celtic. Now, Stephen, you did something very well last week. I want to congratulate you. You said last week something along the lines of, and you might have seen this on YouTube Shorts or TikTok as we do these sorts of things, you said something along the lines of, if these performances continue, we're going to drop points. Not only are we going to drop points, we're going to lose a game. See, when you said that last week, talking about the first half performance, did you mean you'd be talking the very next week about the loss?
No, do you know what? When I say things like that, I hope to never be addressing the fact that it came through, never mind after a week. So sadly, we're in the position now where that has been very prescient, and it has been a week between predicting that we were going to drop further points leading to a defeat and it actually happening. So it's so up and down this season. It really is. We come across as basically bipolar on this podcast because it's up and down, but
we get criticised for it, but it's not our fault.
No, and we often get comments back about how, oh look, the team have had an off day, that's it, but it's so many now. It's adding up to, just if you zoom out and just look at the whole season, it's very, very poor. And yeah, we reserve the right to react to good results because they deserve to be. At the time, we look at a game like Hibs game, perfectly happy with that, but sadly it comes in the same week as a game that is yet another example of using the word unacceptable. I think that's what that Kilmarnock game boils down to. I think if these were one-offs, and I did say that just last week, I said that, see, when we lost to St Mirren last season, that was so out of the ordinary that we all panicked and thought, what on earth was that? That was a complete disaster. But as the weeks went on, we thought, right, well, fair enough, those happen, but that's completely different to be able to see a bad result coming a mile off, and sure enough, it arrived. It's a very, very disappointing. I nearly said start to the season now, but here we're sitting mid-December and we cannot string results together at all. I remind everyone, and Mel and I joked about it on our At The Match podcast for the Hibs game, we'll finally get an opportunity to win 3 games in a row this season. We're going to Kilmarnock, we've got an opportunity to win 3 games for the first time this season, and we've passed it up again. No, we didn't even draw. We lost that game. And to get, sorry to keep going on, but to get to December and no win 3 games in a row for a club like Celtic, I don't want to come across as entitled, but we should have won far more than that. I don't want to get hysterical and start citing things like the COVID season, right? But this form is very reminiscent of that. Now, I think in the first 23 games of this season, which we'll play just now, give or take, we won 13 games this season. That's almost identical to the COVID season. And I'm not saying that because I think that's where it's going to go. What I'm saying is that we, rightly or wrongly, after that season, said, oh, no, but that could never happen again. That was so wild that something like that could never happen again. But it can easily happen again if Celtic continue to manage this weird decline that we're in. So get it fixed, and get it fixed now.
I'm honestly quite sick of it because, as Stephen says, Celtic are up and down and they're all over the place. And I might have said on this podcast, or I might have said in another podcast that we do, if it wasn't on this one, it was on one of our Patreon things, that as much as I like Brendan Rodgers and a manager, and I think he's a good manager, I think he probably carries the can for that performance against Kilmarnock. And as things start to tot up, you sort of run out of other people to blame. So you can look at the players and go, they're not good enough. You can look at the individual performances of players and criticise them. Then you start to criticise the players' selection, the fact that they're playing in the first place. And then at the end of the day, there's no one else to blame but the manager. I think for the first time this season, the focus is probably going to turn on to Brendan. But overall, as Stephen says, taking this season as a whole, taking the whole picture of the season, we've been crap. You don't want to come on a podcast and start moaning about Celtic and all that. And you always try and look slightly for the positives and things that you like, because at the end of the day, you're a Celtic fan, you go, this could happen, maybe that. But
you've tried really hard at that this season, to be fair. Like, before we even start recording, like, what can we talk about that's positive? Because I don't want to be negative again. But when we get here, we're like, there's nothing. There's a lot of the time you're just trying to pull things out of thin air, aren't you?
We are trying to pull things out of thin air, and you're scanning across the pitch for positives. But I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not prepared to do it. That Celtic are since Brendan Rodgers came back, right? I think things have not really felt right. The team have never really kicked into gear, and what I was alluding to earlier about talking about on this podcast, the one we did this under Ronnie Dyler. We watched poor performance, we watched draws, we watched the occasional win. Every time there's an occasional win, we thought, right, this is us kicking into gear. Then we draw the next game. Then we go, oh no, it's not so great. Then we'd win in 2 games and we think, right, this is us kicking into gear. Then we'd drop points again. And we just kept waiting for Ronnie Dyler's Celtic team to kick into gear. We kept waiting, and it just never happened. And you can say whatever reason you want. You can say it was the signings he never got right. You can say the board were penny pinching. But at the end of the day, Ronnie Dyler carried the can for that. This notion that it's just going to all kick into gear for Brendan Rodgers, I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. No, this season. And I see everyone out there saying, oh, we need to get to January and sign 3 or 4 bits of quality. Heard that before too.
Yeah.
I've heard it all before. I've heard them nurse it through to January, bring in 3 first-team starters. I can't remember the last time the Celtic board turned their season around in January. They're just not that quick to react to things. So am I worried about the form? Do I think it's the end of the world? No, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think we've blown the league or anything like that. But I am tired of making excuses. And if you pick over the bones of it, Melly, why are this team so poor at the moment? What was so poor about that Rugby Park performance?
Well, all season we've been sitting here going on like the transfer window was terrible, the players haven't been replaced and all that. And while that's all true, at some point you go, right, this is where we are. So we have to see something. And I don't think the players are good enough, but they're not as bad as they played on Sunday there. That was abysmal. Last week we had the first half, which was unacceptable. This week it was the second half. We were in the lead at half time against Kilmarnock, came out in the second half, and honestly, there's only one winner when Kilmarnock got the equaliser, and it was going to be Kilmarnock. They were bullying Celtic. Matt O'Reilly's come out and said it since. So I think when watching the game, I'm like, why are we so poor here? For a start, it will all lead back to the transfer window and all that, but I'm tired of talking about that as well. And these players need to be doing better. And also, Brendan Rodgers needs to be getting more from these players. And see if you're not getting it from them, there's other players there. You've got Lagerbielke, you've got Nawrocki, who have looked all right. Nat Phillips has never looked all right.
So this is what I want to get at. So I'm trying to avoid the scattergun here as my job as podcast host from us diving all over the place.
It is cocked and ready to
go. It's cocked and ready.
Yeah.
Both of you have got the scatterguns out and I've got mine in my back pocket, right? So one of the things that's mystifying me right now are Celtic selections. We've got players here who are patently not good enough, but they continue to start games, and you only seem to get dropped for Celtic now when you have an absolute disaster. So Yang plays, has a disaster, stops playing games. There's no way that Brendan Rodgers watches that guy training every week and thinks, oh, he's brilliant, and then he has one terrible game, and then Brendan all of a sudden goes, no, he can't start anymore.
Yeah.
That's really not how football works. If Brendan had faith in him, he would let him have his one bad game. He wouldn't just drop him out of nowhere. But we all know that he's no good enough, and that's why he's not starting games. Nat Phillips, the guy's a donkey.
Yeah.
He's an absolute donkey. What Brendan Rodgers seen in training for that guy, he won't be back playing for Celtic because he's had a disaster. I don't know why you have to have a public disaster before you get dropped. Liam Scales, we've all had our fun, but he's nowhere near good enough.
I'm glad, like, I've said it weeks ago, he's terrible at passing the ball, and now he's defending.
Who is?
Liam Scales. His defending's not good enough anymore. Both goals were down with him and Taylor's side. He doesn't go to the men, and it's done now. This experiment where I think, oh, he's doing all right. He's doing all right for Liam Scales.
What do you think Brendan Rodgers has seen in these players to pick them? Because surely Brendan Rodgers is doing this thing that Strachan used to do, was picking good teammates. Pick players that
he almost implied that with Nat Phillips, though, didn't he? He said that about how he's so great around the club and he's great in training and all that. It makes me think that
he's costing us goals. He's literally throwing them in the net.
There is an enormous disconnect now between what must have been going on at training and what ends up on the pitch, and who is responsible for that, I've no idea. But Brendan Rodgers keeps talking about that, how you need to prove yourself in training, that's how you get into my team. And then these players who are evidently or apparently, allegedly proving it in training are going onto the field and making asses of themselves.
What's happening in midfield? We've got a midfield berth that's up for grabs, right? We've got Iwata starting games just now, who's done okay. We had Home, who a couple of weeks ago Brendan Rodgers said thinks he's going to be a very good player. All he needs to start games and get some confidence. Obviously, that doesn't count anymore. He's binned. And then we've got Bernardo, who we only use to play, let me check, the best teams we're going to play this season. And so Bernardo's
Turnbull's the top scorer.
Turnbull. So Bernardo's not good enough to play against Livingston, Kilmarnock, Hibs, Hearts, whatever, but he's good enough to play against Lazio and Atletico Madrid and Feyenoord. It makes no sense at all. So the midfield, Brendan's selections, Brendan, you're confusing the life out of me with this. You're picking players that are patently no good enough and you're chopping and changing everything. As Stephen says, Turnbull in midfield's another one that he top goal scorer, We all know he's got his limitations. Brendan picks him, doesn't he pick him?
I'm not calling for Turnbull to be picked, by the way. I just mean how
It's adding to
confusing
the
this
confusion.
has been. Yeah.
See, for the first half, it was all right. It was decent enough. Celtic were in the lead, gave away a couple of chances, but that second half came out and I was like, it was down our side. We were behind the stand. Like, what's going on here? All they're doing is getting the ball, playing it forward early, and Celtic are getting bullied. Nat Phillips and Liam Scales get absolutely ragdolled by these defenders. If that was Christopher Julian or something, it would be branded on him for the rest of his career that he's no good enough and any muscle he goes up against to get. So they two get beat, but I need to take it. I'll probably go through the team here, but
I said don't do the starter gun and I was giving it defence. Midfielders, Bernardo, sorry. So defence.
I want to go right to the back. Joe Hart, it's horrible watching now because every single corner that's taken in, he's all over the place. It's pure panic in him. Every time he gets the ball, he's cutting in towards his own goal. He's playing passes behind players. And when he does get the ball and try to do something different, he was chipping it to Greg Taylor. That is what the other team want. They're forcing us into these mistakes and we can't play out from the back. I think that was the main thing for me on Sunday was we couldn't get out because Liam Scales is terrible at pass the ball. Nat Phillips is an absolute disaster on the ball. And Greg Taylor kept shelling these balls inside into an area where the ball was getting intercepted. The three of them, along with Joe Hart, cannot pass the ball. And then when we did go chip it into O and hope for something, that is bread and butter for Kilmarnock. But we didn't get MD near him because our wingers are terrified of putting in hard work and graft. I thought the midfield did all right. That was the only thing. The problem was we weren't getting it to there, but I'm also going to sort of contradict that a bit. We were playing out from the back and we weren't getting it into midfield, right? So that can be a problem with the defenders passing being poor, but it's also a problem at why are you not available to pass the ball to? So I'm looking at Iwata being the deepest one. Why is he not available to pass to? He was decent in the Hibs game, but this game he was poor. And look, Celtic got worse when he went off, to be honest, but we just never looked like getting back in the game. And I can look at Brendan Rodgers and ask him why he's doing things, but again, look, even if the manager's getting it wrong, which maybe he is right now, and maybe Celtic aren't doing what they should be or what he's telling them, or maybe his tactics aren't that good, but I'm not going to another game and watching players not give everything. Palmer couldn't be less interested in that game if he want a bit of rain. He's only interested in the flash stuff. His goals have masked up a lot of deficiencies in his game. He's not interested in working hard. Mikey Johnson pulled out of tackles at least 3 times in that game. It's unacceptable. O's up there trying to do his bit to throw himself about, but give him chances and he blazes them over. I can't even make connections with him. I'll swing it back on you. What's good about this team?
There's nothing really good about this team just now because compared to last season...
I'm sorry to jump in, but I need you to answer that because...
I'm going to tell you. So right now, what's good about Celtic is Matt O'Reilly. But what we're missing for last season is there's no Jota on the wing. There's no Jota, right? So there's that mercurial talent. We don't have that anymore. He's gone. We don't even have a Bada ghosting in at the back post, finishing things for us. We don't have Dyson Maeda running about mental, closing people down into mistakes.
Hatate.
We don't have Hatate absolutely balling in midfield. We don't have a solid defence of Carter Vickers and Starfelt. I mean, they went how long without conceding and how long without losing a game?
I think every game we've dropped points in the league this season, Carter Vickers hasn't played.
We certainly don't have that anymore. What else am I missing? We don't have Aaron Moy coming off the bench, drifting into games, ghosting, pulling the strings. All these things are missing from the Celtic team, and I accept that, right? But what I don't accept is what you said is Brendan Rodgers can get more out of these players, and Brendan Rodgers' problem is he read the Riot Act, Stephen, last week, and it lasted for one half and one full game, and then immediately the players have reverted back to type.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, at the most we get a storming second half, good performance against Hibs, and then at 20 minutes against Kilmarnock.
And we all know as a manager publicly coming out and saying I had to read the Riot Act, that's like break glass in case of emergency stuff. Yeah. That's a Hail Mary. You can't do that every week.
Yeah, I mean, I I don't know what's going on. It feels like one of
We're
those...
off the podcast then.
Yeah, it feels like one of those situations where there's just something rotten at the core of everything Celtic do just now. Now, I don't want to be completely dismissive and say that it's all a disaster. The season hasn't been a complete disaster, but it's been poor. I don't think we can argue that anymore. And I think if we're still sitting around saying, it's just one game here, we've just had an off day, I think we need to wake up here and start to recognise the patterns. Now, I know I compared it to the COVID season. I don't think it is that just yet, but that's where we have to correct it, because that's where it can go if you're not careful. No, none of us went into that season thinking that's how it was going to go, and none of us went into this season thinking that's how it's going to go. So we have to correct this now. But it feels like, you know how like Chelsea or Man United, where you look at them and think, well, what is wrong? Because they've got good managers, they've got up and coming managers, they've proven managers, they've got all the money in the world, they've got massively high salaries, budgets, they've got everything in place, they've got good young players, they've brought in a load of players. What is wrong with them? And I think it just feels like the same with Celtic. There just seems to be something rotten from the top down, from the board falling out with the fans, to maybe, I don't know, maybe appointing the wrong manager. I don't know. It kind of feels like that to me. I know we all said at the time he's the best man for the job. He's the biggest, highest profile name we could get. But was he the right man for the job? I don't know.
We all know that there's more to it than just appointing the manager. Like you say, getting the wrong manager doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad manager, but getting in Brendan Rodgers, who wants to play a particular way, and not being prepared to buy the players for him is, by definition, you've got the wrong manager.
Yeah.
But my problem is there must be more to give from these Celtic players, and the only concession I'll make, Melly, is that there's some absolute crap in that squad who just can't do it. And see on the game, see on the day-to-day, see in the 90 minutes, right? As you say, if you can't pass it for the back, right? If you're simply unable, like Greg Taylor was getting bullied, Liam Scales was getting bullied, and Nat Phillips can't pass the ball. If you eventually do get it up front, or you do get it in the midfield and you look up, you have no confidence. If you look up in Yang's there, I've made this point before, maybe there's just no confidence in a lot of these players to actually do anything. Like you say, O's been good. He's been mixed, but he's been good enough lately, but he's missing inexcusable chances. So you're just like, as one of the better players in our team, you're probably tearing your hair out watching this going, what am I doing here? I mean, Callum McGregor, under the COVID season, and again, I'm not comparing it, but one thing I did pick out the COVID season was he was running about all over the place trying to put out fires, trying to help at left back, right back, because he knew that some players had deficiencies and he had to help them out. And I was reminded of that in the Kilmarnock game. The winning goal was scored, in my opinion, because Callum McGregor moves over with Liam Scales, who didn't engage. So Callum McGregor's watching him in real time going, this guy's no tackling, he's no doing anything, and he'd probably get beat anyway, which allowed the Killie goal scorer to go stand behind him and put the ball away. It wasn't a difficult goal for Killie to score. We were just all over the place, and I just think there's a lack of confidence in this Celtic team. There's a lack of... Maybe Liam Scales doesn't lack confidence on his own ability, maybe he just doesn't have it. But there's certainly a lack of confidence in this Celtic team confidence in your teammate, confidence to do the difficult thing, confidence to try things, and we're just not seeing that. And that for me is what's inexcusable. It's Celtic are not trying the things, and it's not coming off. Now, we all praise Hatate to the hilt for trying things, didn't work. I was giving Yang credit for trying things earlier on in the season, didn't work. We've just stopped trying things. The Greg Taylor situation, Brendan needs to just suck it up, because Greg Taylor was very good under Ange Postecoglou, not playing that left back, winger role, whatever you want to call it. He was brought inside. You need to go back to that, because it's the only way Greg Taylor knows how to play the position. Now, I think we're bringing a left back in January, which tells me that maybe Brendan Rodgers wants to play a certain way, and he's trying to nurse the team through to January. But we're pissing away our lead in the league here. It's a precarious game we're playing.
It is, and it's difficult to watch right now, because it is all... It's not even safe when I ask what's good about this team, right? We're not passing teams to death, so we're not in control all the time. We're not strong because we get bullied. We're not missing loads of chances because we don't create them. And this team is soft. We've said it. Brendan Rodgers has said it. It is soft. It doesn't take much to get at Celtic. And what do we do? Do we move Greg Taylor inside? Right, that's fine. But then you need a winger out wide who can take on men. Palmer's not that ahead of him. So why is our squad like this? There's nobody out there that can do that. We don't have wingers that take on players. And I think a lot of it, look, Celtic aren't playing well, but it's that contrast where you've got Cameron Carter-Vickers, Callum McGregor, Matt O'Reilly, Kyogo to the rest. The stark contrast in players. I mean, if you're looking at it and going, right, what's wrong with Celtic? Mikey Johnston's playing. And we want him to play because he's probably the best option there. Greg Taylor has had, 1.5 good seasons at Celtic, and while he was good, we know he can't do anything else. We know he can't do anything else, yet he's playing. If you were sitting here last season and you thought, right, going into next season, Celtic have Greg Taylor still playing because he's the best man they can get, Liam Scales will be playing at centre-half and Mikey Johnston will be out wide, you go, there's no way that's happening. Yet here we are doing that, bringing in players who are just inferior to what we've got. And not even the players we've brought in, the players we've brought back are not good or are nowhere near.
As I said
good.
a few weeks ago, guys from 2019 we're bringing back into the team and expecting it to be different to how it was then. See Brendan Rodgers' part in this. I also said last week, what's your part in this, right? Because I feel like all that's been going on with the board and the players and the recruitment has kind of shielded Brendan Rodgers from a bit of criticism.
The attention's fully on him now.
Yeah, and we've been making excuses, but just as a bit of a thought experiment here, right? What is the problem with the confidence? Why is this team so bad? Why have all the players regressed so much? Who has improved under Brendan Rodgers despite it being his reputation that he improves players? No one. Matt O'Reilly is scoring more goals, but can we necessarily say he's improved vastly as a player? Hard to say. Everyone else has gone back the way. See if Neil Lennon had taken over from Ange Postecoglou and these results were being turned in, there'd be absolute uproar just now. And people would be questioning the standards, the professionalism, everything. People would be chucking all the toys at the pram.
And sharks.
Chucking sharks at buses. But people would be furious if Neil Lennon was turning in these performances. There would be no, but they're no use to Neil Lennon's style of play and all that. What is the style of play? Because see, that's
that's
where
where the lack
Taylor.
of confidence comes from. Because in so often with under Ange, what we saw was a system. The players drilled. They knew they had full confidence in the system. They knew if it wasn't work, it eventually would work. But you don't see these players, as Melly said, they're not trying anything.
No, well, the thing with Greg
Brendan Rodgers called it basketball. He said the team lacked confidence. It turns into a bit of a basketball match. There's too much side to side. But that's on you, Brendan. That's you. You're the manager.
Again, as I said, this Greg Taylor thing, right? I'm not excusing Greg Taylor's performances just now because there was a moment in the Kilmarnock game where with that bit where he just passed it out to the wing and just invited pressure. Under no pressure, he just turned and tried to put it out the pitch and there's a Kilmarnock player standing right there. He passed it straight to his feet. I'm not excusing that because that's nothing to do with the system or what position you're playing or what you're being asked to do on the pitch. You don't just pass it to opposition players without looking. So I'm not excusing his performances, but why are we now doing this to Greg Taylor? Why have we gone from getting the performances out of him last season where it was leading to so many goals, Greg Taylor's positioning, the positions he was taking up as this inverted fullback, and it's not just drifting inside the pitch, it's coming up in attacking positions.
Number 10
number 10, appearing on the edge of the box, sometimes on the penalty spot, impossible to defend against. After the Celtic game, I watched a bit of Spurs versus Newcastle because I thought, well, something will happen in this game that's not going to make me feel sad. So I'll tune into this, right? And I watched
Look at what you could have had Celtic, Eddie Howe and Ange Postecoglou.
So I watched the analysis team at halftime and full time. So it was Matthew Dawson and Jamie Redknapp and Kelly Cates, I think is her name there, formerly Kelly Dalglish. So they were raving about Udogie, his performance, their left back. And he's not been in great form all season, but his performance in this game was exactly as we described Greg Taylor last season. So appearing in positions where it was impossible to defend against, how do you predict which positions this guy's going to pop up in? All of a sudden, here's my left back on the penalty spot. Whose guy is this? Oh, it's a goal, right? So that happened several times. I remember making that exact point last season about Greg Taylor. Impossible for Scottish teams to defend against us. So we're not doing that anymore. Right, fine. We've got a new system. What is that system and why are we changing that? Greg Taylor's been asked to play as a more conventional left back. Why? What is the benefit to that? Because he's not overlapping. We're not getting wingers coming inside and he's overlapping and getting balls in. That doesn't happen anymore. So what is the plan here, if any? What is the point in bringing Kyogo a little bit further back? Because we saw that at the start of the season to varying degrees of success. He was still scoring goals, but we had Kyogo, ironically, given it's the team Ange went to, with Kyogo playing almost like Harry Kane, who was dropping deep and getting involved in the play and not being that penalty box predator, getting in the near post and flicking it in and appearing behind defenders, a near invisible penalty box predator. That was his main strength. Why have we stopped that? What is the plan? Because I can accept that there is a different style at play, bringing a new manager in, but I need to have seen it before December. I need to see the benefit of playing Greg Taylor like that when he's been so bad this season and Kyogo is no longer the threat he once was. what are we getting out of this?
Well, that's what I think's happened at Celtic. Brendan Rodgers has turned up and went, here's how I want to play. Cool. First day of his job, and he's went to the board. Here are the players I need to do it, right? So they went off to do what they're supposed to do and bring in the players that he wants, as well as these club signings that we've had our eye on for ages. So all these players come in, and Brendan Rodgers doesn't get the players he wants, and Brendan Rodgers has thought to himself, right, what do I need to do? Well, I can't have the players train for this formation, do this for 6 weeks, for 8 weeks, for 2 months, for 3 months, and then rip it all up and put it in the bin and say, right, lads, we're playing a different way now. We're going to entirely change what we're doing. So I just need to keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully get the players in January. And to an extent, if that's what's happening, I can maybe understand that, right? Maybe managers, I don't know off the top of my head how many managers have completely changed their formation mid-season and the way they play and all that sort of stuff. To me, that adds a bit of panic and a bit of confusion because you need total buy-in for the players. Fine. Why are you picking Liam Scales and Nat Phillips though? Because I guarantee you Nawrocki and Lagerbielke aren't worse than these guys.
No, they can't be.
They absolutely can't be. There's no chance they are. Why were you picking Yang all this time? Why are you picking players that are not doing it? Because there are other players available to you that simply must be better than the ones you've got. Okay, you don't trust Bernabei, but the Liam Scales thing is just such a red flag for me now. And I know we keep battering Liam Scales, and it is particularly him, but it's not also him because it's all falling down at the defence for me. We're conceding goals at the defence, and they're no springing attacks quick enough, and it's such a red flag. I'm like, Brendan, it's like, are you just going to work with this till the wheels fall off? Is that the plan? Meanwhile, you've got. Well, I didn't think Lager was great, but I didn't think he was that bad. I don't think we conceded a goal while he was in there. I mean, he looked shaky at times, but. Yeah. Is it one rule for one and one rule for another? You know, you need home to get game time, so he builds his confidence, but Lagerbielke, he's pulled and he doesn't get game time to build his confidence. Meanwhile, he's sitting watching Liam Scales be crap. It's pretty confusing. I mean, for the first time this season, I do think that all eyes are on Brendan now. He came out after the game and he was very subdued and he was talking about players lacking confidence and, you know, players being a bit too cagey and it turning into a basketball match. And the whole time in his post-match interview, I was just thinking, these are all your fault. Yeah, everything you've discussed now is your fault. We've given you the excuses of the players. We've given you the excuses of the transfer window. At the end of the day, though, your job as manager is to work with what you've got, and you can't just go through the first half of the season putting in crap performances. And he knows as well as anyone, Melly, that being Celtic manager and being top of the league by 1 point or 2 points or 10 points or 8 points, that's all very well and good and that's fine, but what we want is to see something for this team. We've seen no new manager bounce. We've seen no improvement under Brendan Rodgers. That was a treble winning team last season, battering people left, right and centre, playing some fantastic football. And the only positive from the Celtic team this season is Matt O'Reilly's onto a game.
Yeah, and you talk about players regressed. I agree with that. Kyogo isn't doing as well, is he? Greg Taylor's not playing as well, but can Joe Hart do any better? Nah. Is Liam Scales going to do any better? Nah. Is Mikey Johnson going to do any better? No. Is bringing James Forrest on the answer? Because it never was. Is Turnbull the answer? No. All these things that we weren't doing before, we're now doing now and expecting different results.
I think out of fairness, I want to just say on the Mikey Johnson thing, he's a different case in my opinion. Mikey Johnson is playing probably strictly through injury.
Yeah.
Maeda would be first choice there and Abada would be choice there. He's not the same as the other people we've mentioned who there are viable paid for options on the bench. I don't think we'd be seeing Mikey Johnson or even Yang was Maeda and Abada fit. I just put that in the record because people will be picking up us on it, rightly so.
Yeah, and look, Maeda and Abada come with their faults as well, don't they? I think coming towards the end of last season, I say, look, we need another winger because Jota's fine, but on the other side, we need somebody with a bit of quality because when he's not playing, there's nobody taking on. Not addressed that at all. We've brought in Palma, who's a completely different player, doesn't take players on, and then we've brought in Yang, who looks terrible, and Tilio, who just gets bombed out every time he plays. He's tiny, he doesn't look like he's got it, and does he honestly look like he's ever going to make it at Celtic? No. I'm starting to look at home now. Is he ever going to make it? Bernardo would be as well sending him home. We've just wasted so much time, but looking at the players on the pitch, do better. I don't care if you don't agree with what the manager's doing or whatever, but the fact is you're paid to play for Celtic, and so many of them are passing the buck. They're taking the easy option, passing it inside, passing it to the side. Nobody's trying to make runs. Nobody's trying to break through. The amount of times it's Greg Taylor, Scales, Phillips, and then back across the three of them. Alistair Johnson's the only one out the back five, including Joe Hart, I can give pass marks to recently. 1 out of 5 players. The rest of them aren't making things happen, and that's why they made it so easy for Kilmarnock to play, because they know how it's going to go. So Kilmarnock just left it all and let it go over the left-hand side, because Celtic won't get out that way, because the 2 players over that side, the centre-half and the left-back, won't do anything. Once it goes back to Joe Hart, close down the right-hand side, because then he's always doing his chip balls over to Greg
terrified
Taylor.
Armstrong as well. Armstrong gave them an absolutely torrid time on that side, so the lot of them looked spooked as soon as he got the ball. He was cutting. See that chance where he came in and shot from the right-hand side on his left foot? It was like, it's as if we were playing against Messi, just dropping shoulders and players are just jumping out the way of him, embarrassing stuff. And that Armstrong's a good player. I don't want to be like patronising and say he's like some sort of dud. He's a good player, but we were treating him with an awful lot of respect out there, and he was getting an awful lot of joy out of defence. Like, I know people really like this Liam Scales story, right? And I can feel him getting
hammered him in this podcast.
And I think I can feel him getting a bit Johnny Hayesified out there, because anytime you criticise Liam Scales, it's no, he doesn't deserve it. He's been one of the best players of the season. Look, I know we all love like an underdog story. He's come from nowhere. He's the type of guy we love to get behind, but we need to get real about this now. He's done fine, but we need to improve in this.
The reason I think Nat Phillips needs to go back in January.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
he needs to go back in January. Liam Scales is a Celtic player, but now he's starting to look every inch the Aberdeen player, and I think the beginnings and ends of all our problems are the defence. I think the wingers are an interesting thing of though as well, because I think it's clear that when Brendan brought that change about the tactical change, he wanted Kyogo to drop deep, and then he wanted 2 wide strikers. In fact, I think he's even called them wide strikers. I think that's what he was looking to achieve with Palmer, and then maybe Maeda or Abada. And I think what's happened to me and what's spooked me a bit about Brendan Rodgers is, see when the selection changes, he doesn't adapt. There seems to be very little adaptation. So Brendan Rodgers, Kyogo stopped firing, probably because he couldn't get the ball. We couldn't get the players around him. So he takes out Kyogo and puts in. But that to me is not the answer, because Kyogo's the better player. Kyogo's the more lethal finisher.
Yeah. And
so
it's not as if Kyogo's missing chances galore. We're simply not creating them.
Exactly. So you don't adapt by going, well, the system's absolutely correct, so it must be the player's fault. No, I'm beginning to think, Brendan, I think it might be, the problem here might be your system.
Yeah.
If you've got a lethal striker like Kyogo, who's scored 60 odd goals over the past 2 seasons, and then all of a sudden he stops scoring goals and you can't supply him the chances, it's not that, this guy's he's not got it anymore. Kyogo's definitely still got it. But what's happened is the system has stopped providing chances for Kyogo, so you need to adapt.
Yeah, I think when I look about Celtic's squad and you think, right, what can we do? Right, what we cannot do is go 3-5-2, because we quite simply do not have wing backs, right? We cannot I'm looking at it going, right, if you want 2 wide forwards, say it's Palmer and Abada, that's absolutely fine, and Kyogo in there, sort of like Mane, Firmino and Salah at Liverpool. Brilliant. What do Liverpool have? Marauding fullbacks. What does Celtic not have? Marauding fullbacacks. So, all right, fullbacks need to sit in, then they need to be tight, sit back. Right, what do you need then? Wingers that can get from the touchline to the byline and cross it. We don't have that. Our squad is all over the place. I'm tired of talking about it. What do we do then? Do we go 4-2-3-1? David Humble's not good enough to start and play a full season for Celtic, so we don't have a number 10 in there. So we're in between about 3 different formations here, where I don't see what else we do. We just have to get through this right now. We need Maeda and Abada back. Is that going to make a huge difference to us?
Can you ban them from passing backwards? Is that a thing? Can you I suppose you could, but as a football manager,
again, if Brendan wants to play like basketball or wants to reference basketball, once we cross the halfway line, you can't go
honestly,
back over it.
You're not allowed to. Stop passing it back. Every pass needs to be with intent. You need to play it forward. One thing I think we're desperately missing is a midfielder that can step up and break the lines and pass the ball. Remember, Ayer used to do that. Remember a
midfielder or a defender?
A defender, sorry, a centre back that can step in and play. But I don't believe for a minute that Nawrocki can't pass a football.
Well, that was fairly evident when he played. I know it wasn't perfect, but it was such a small sample size. He looked good. He looked comfortable
because he would get injured.
Yeah, he get comfortable. He looked comfortable passing it with both feet, and now he's just nowhere to be seen.
Because he's in love. Because Brendan's in love with Liam Scales. Because he's doing the Strachan thing of being a right good teammate. But you're rewarding this to the detriment of the squad. You're rewarding this to the detriment of the team, and maybe that's another thing that plays into players' minds. What does that tell the group? If you're Nawrocki and you're like, they phoned me up in the summer and they were chasing me all summer and they paid £4.5 million for me. I come, I play well. This boy comes in, takes my place. Fair enough, he does okay, but he's crap now. I'm still bombed out. I just think there's something no right about the way Brendan's picking and setting up his team.
Yeah, and look, I'm fully on board with like Brendan Rodgers isn't doing well enough here, but I'm going back to it. There's no heart in this team. There's no heart in this team.
That comes from the manager.
Well, yeah, but also like, but I'm a big fan of Roy Keane, and what he talks about is like when he talks about Alex Ferguson, he's like, I don't want him praising me because I go out and play for me and my teammates. I don't. Why should it be a manager that has to? You're playing for Celtic. It's probably as good as it's going to get for a lot of these players. Yeah, you've got guys pulling out of challenges, not wanting to do the dirty work, not willing to be brave on the ball. That is the bare minimum.
It's as good as it's going to get for Brendan Rodgers, because if he makes an ass of this, he's never getting a job in the Premier League again.
No chance. Where's the energy in this team as well? Where's the drive? And I know that's
it's Matt O'Reilly and McGregor. That's it.
And I know what I'm saying here is a bit Roy Keane, a bit Graham Souness on Sky. Where's the, you
want somebody to get and give them one right off the ball.
It's not so much that, but look, under Ange, and I don't think that it was perfect under Ange. I'm not doing that's just misty-eyed rubbish to say that everything was rosy and everything was perfect for 2 seasons there. There were dips off, but the whole idea of Ange, the whole premise of that, of the title races such as they were in those seasons, was that we absolutely overwhelmed teams, blew them away, and then got tired after maybe 60 or 70 minutes, change the whole midfield and then just sort of settle in, bring on an Aaron Moy and get a control. We absolutely blow teams away. Does it always work? No, it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. That's not how management, that's not how football works. But it was a good idea to get these teams.
But there was some shocking performances from Ange's team towards the end. I remember us sitting on podcast going, I was shocked that a Celtic team could turn in a performance that low.
That's absolutely fine, but that's because the recruitment started getting bad as well. The squad wasn't quite as strong. But
or was it a case of the manager? They all knew the manager was going. They weren't that engaged. Their league was won.
But how many games did Celtic win in a row to get that treble one last season? Was it 15 or 16?
So this is the point I'm making. See, when there's something to play for and the manager's on it and everyone's engaged and everyone's bought in, this Celtic team can play. But see, the minute you take your eye off the ball, the Celtic manager, they can turn in performances, the likes of which we've seen under Ange, the likes of which we're seeing now. As soon as you don't pay full attention, as soon as it's not, well, maybe that's unfair. Brendan Rodgers obviously working hard and paying attention. But the point I'm making is, it's in the locker for these Celtic teams. Just because they've got the Celtic jersey on doesn't mean that they're immune from terrible performances. We saw it under Ange and we're seeing it now under Brendan. But what Ange managed to do was find a way to make some excellent performances, and we're not really seeing that under Brendan. Like, if you could point to one performance this season, don't give me the Champions League, because it's easy to get yourself up. It is easy to get yourself up for Champions League games, playing against Atletico Madrid and Lazio and all that. That's the easy part. But if you can point me to one league performance, even when we beat Rangers, I didn't think we were that great.
No. Again, I want to be clear here before we move on. I'm not saying that what Ange did was perfect and what Brendan Rodgers is doing is wrong. What I'm saying is that I could see what the idea was under Ange. I could see what the objective was. How we get these games won is we stick to our football, we stick to our principles, and we get the games won. Performances will lead to results, not the other way around. I can't see that with this team. And I don't really know why that is. We're being patient, we're being controlled and all that, but we're just...
But see, sometimes... I was on this podcast a couple of weeks ago saying, look, we're not great, but this is the games, look, we're in control of these games, right? But I think maybe that was just me making myself feel better for the fact that Celtic were boring.
Yeah.
It's because we are boring.
A coping mechanism, because we are boring. And as I said, that run Celtic went on last season, I know that people thought the performances dipped off a bit towards the end, but that was just due to the standards that had been met throughout the previous 18 months or so. Celtic won something like 15 or 16 games in a row last season to win the treble, and then basically the kind of down tools after the league was won, lost a couple of silly games. That's unthinkable now. Going on a winning streak like that is completely unthinkable this season, because they can't win 3 games in a row, never mind 15 or 16. Like the idea that we're going to sign all this quality in January, which I have serious doubts about anyway.
I'd settle for 3 players over 6 foot, because one thing that's really, really doing my nut in is the more I'm starting to catch bits and bobs of English football and watching the Premier League, and I've made this point before either on this podcast or the other ones, professional footballers now are physical monsters in every regard, in every position, and they're good on the ball. I know people like that are hard to come by, but we've got a team of absolute midgets here that get bullied in games domestically. The last time I saw a team that small, they were pulling Augustus Gloop out of a river of chocolate. That's how bad it is. We really need to bring in, don't sign a single player under 6 foot in the January window. I don't care what position it is.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we want just absolute cloggers for the sake of them being big. I'm just saying, like, it has the recruitment still has to be smart within those parameters, but just change the parameters of the search a little bit to
and
find
come
that.
on, Celtic are not signing the creme de la creme. You know, the bucket of players that which Celtic sign from. It's not like Pep's going, I need a very particular player that's this, that, and that, and then well, Gaffer, there's only 3 of those in the world. Well, I've got all the money in the world, go buy one.
Yeah.
Celtic are fishing out of a massive, massive pool. Celtic have probably got a list there with 5 names on it.
And getting tadpoles.
Aye, if 3 of them are under 6 foot, just make it a list of 2 and pick between the 2 monsters.
It's the one thing he asked for, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One thing he said was power, and we were, well, maybe Bernardo. No, it's not that.
No, that's a mystery now.
Like, I don't want to get too baby out the bathwater, as we like saying here, because
take a drink, everyone.
Well, this isn't baby out of the bathwater. We're being very specific here. We're pointing to what we think's wrong with the Celtic team, albeit in a sort of slightly manic way, because we've all been holding these thoughts in since we got in front of the microphones, and we're very firmly now, for the first time this season, focusing on Brendan Rodgers and going, this is your problem to fix. The players have got it, and the players who are not playing have got it, and the players that are playing have got it, and people like Mikey Johnson's copped it, and guys that can't even get in the squad have copped it. We've done all that. In fact, we've been very fair to Brendan Rodgers in the European games. We've said, look, we can see what the manager's trying to do in these European games, but the players don't have the confidence to do it. Well, now that lack of confidence is carried on, and at domestic games where we can't even beat Kilmarnock, and we're dropping points left, right and centre, we can't string 3 wins together. Sorry, when it comes to December, when it's mid-December, when it's nearly my birthday,
that's the longest you've ever went with
it's the manager's fault. It's on the manager.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree that it's not good, and the manager has to carry the can at some point. But I think when managers come into Celtic, this is kind of what happens most of the time. If we want to look back at last season, that's fine. But that was Ange Postecoglou having 3 or 4 transfer windows, wasn't it? If we look back to his start to the season, and I mean from the start of the season to January, whether it be him, whether it be Neil Lennon before him, things don't settle down, because a lot of the time you've got qualifiers, then you've got Champions League, or you've got Europa League games. Your squad doesn't settle down until you're really out of Europe and we move into January. We still need to do that. We have had players injured. Injuries have been bad for us this season, and it's not the amount of injuries, it's the key injuries to guys that we simply cannot replace. Celtic's first 11 is decent. Take MD out of that and it starts to fall down.
So give me a name.
What do you mean?
Give me a name. Who's, if you could have one player back from injury right now, who would you want?
Maeda, probably.
Do you think Maeda's been great this season, be honest? Before he get injured?
He's been decent, but again, I don't see him being scared to be given the ball. I don't see him, he sets it from the off. Him and Kyogo press. Who's doing that right now? Palma is one of the laziest players I've seen at Celtic. He tries to turn around and blame everybody else. And I think I mentioned it, Matt O'Reilly and McGregor were shouting at him in one of the games recently that was your pass. And I've seen it a lot with O'Reilly, who last season I didn't see him open his mouth too much. He's moaning at players, and rightly so.
So that sort of backs up one of my theories that no wonders there's no confidence in the team, because Matt O'Reilly and McGregor, like, this fucking guy. And then they'll be looking at the back going, this fucking guy. Like, the good players in the squad are looking at the crap ones going, how are we supposed to work with this?
And that's it. It's not even the lack of quality that's annoying me right now, because it's really annoying me. It's the lack of effort and bravery and working hard. That's the bare minimum. But what I was saying is, look, things will hopefully settle down once we get a couple of players back. But Celtic have to go out and be proactive for this straight away. It's glaring what is wrong with Celtic. It was glaring in the summer. You blew it. Brendan Rodgers, this team need to bring this together and see if the guys aren't good enough and aren't going to play, ship them out. It doesn't matter how, or take them away from this and get players in that do, because it's not just Brendan Rodgers that's going to suffer here. It's this team, and ultimately we're suffering right now. It's crap to watch. It's boring, and we're running out of excuses, because who's next after Brendan Rodgers? Because we've been over the board, we've been over the players, been over Brendan Rodgers. What do we just go round in circles here? It's the Holy Trinity is fucked.
I'm just going to pause this little bit of heated debate just to let you know that it's Christmas time, and we are very happy to support the What's Your Battery At campaign by Men Matter Scotland. And to tell you more about that, here's a video message from our very own Martin Melly, and if you'd like to donate, the link is in the programme notes.
Here at Men Matter Scotland, we aim to prevent suicide and have people having conversations about their mental health. So to do that, we are launching our What's Your Battery At campaign. How often do we ask or get asked, how you doing or how you feeling, but we never really answer it properly. So at Men Matter Scotland here, we ask people a second question. We want you to ask, what's your battery at? What's your mental health battery as a percentage? This allows us to gauge how people are feeling and to check how people are feeling themselves. We're asking you to get involved in a couple of ways. Firstly, help people have open and honest conversations about their mental health by asking them, what's your battery at? Or you can donate to our winter appeal where we aim to raise £25,000 to continue to support the men who come to our service. Remember, ask your friends, ask your family, ask your colleagues, and just as importantly, ask yourselves, what's your battery at?
Absolutely terrific presenting skills from Mark Melly. Not the best, second best presenting skills in the podcast, I think there. But you did a good job. You need some tips. You've got my number, mate, anytime you want it. Christmas is a time for giving, Stephen.
Yes.
And if you were on the Celtic board and you were in a giving mood for Brendan Rodgers, and you're not allowed to give him his P45 because it's far too late and it would cost us far too much money. You're going to give Brendan some players for Christmas. What are the key areas you think we need to address in the January window?
A must is left back. We're in urgent need of a striker now as well because of the Asia Cup, which is imminent as well. So it's going to probably remove all three of our options at centre forward. Terrific stuff.
Potentially,
Simon as well.
yeah.
So we urgently need one of those. And a goalkeeper, I don't know if a goalkeeper is going to get done in January. I would strongly doubt that. I think we just need to sort of plod on to the end of the season with Joe Hart, hoping that nothing disastrous happens. Let's everybody, I know it's Christmas not, let's relax on the contracts though. I think we've had our fun with the contracts.
Easy, big fella.
David Turnbull's new contract, Liam Scales' new contract, Joe Hart's new contract.
Nope.
Relax, guys.
I think, well, Brendan Rodgers has relaxed on Turnbull contract. They spoke about it, I think, last week or the week before. He says he's not going to lose any sleep over it if David Turnbull doesn't sign a new contract. Which, you know, if you're David Turnbull, probably means you're not going to be racing to the biro to get that one signed.
It doesn't seem like David Turnbull's particularly interested either. And why would you? I mean, he needs to play at some point. But just everybody pause, everybody ease up on the contracts. Right, we've done loads of that recently, and some of them are looking preposterous. Quite honestly, some of the contracts that are getting handed out at Celtic these days. So relax on that. We need 4 players minimum. Now that's pie in the sky stuff as far as I'm concerned. That's not going to happen, but that's as a minimum. We need 4 players in January just to break
4
even
starters.
here.
Combat aged males.
Yes, combat aged males. Look, this is just to maintain, to steady the ship. We need these players in because that's what we needed all along, and that's what we didn't get.
So that's what Brendan Rodgers said before we lost them. But again, it's a word we use quite a lot. Is it? That's unacceptable to think that a recruitment team cannot find 4 players that are available within our budget and better than Joe Hart, Greg Taylor, Mikey Johnson and
over 6 foot.
Yeah,
don't forget that
you
bit.
can find that in Football Manager, just filter.
There's the technology to do that now. We've teamed up with Alex Barker, Euro expert from The Athletic, and he is away out on a scouting mission to find us some key positions, and we're recording podcasts with Melly. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify the areas and come up with 4-5 selection options for Celtic and talk about the players. And obviously when Celtic do sign someone, we're going to have those guys professionally scouted as well. All of that on patreon.com/20minutetims, link in bio. Melly,
Champions League next, lads.
You never. Hey, no, listen. I want to say my bit about the transfer window. You never let me say my bit about the transfer window. Definitely a left back, over 6 foot monster, please. I think we and this is preposterous, right? But I think we probably need another right winger to go.
Yeah, we do.
How many of those can we possibly afford to carry?
We've got so many. Apparently none of the central midfielders are fancied, so we could probably use another one of those, even though it's the most crowded area of the pitch.
Signed 3 of them in the summer.
Yeah, and we definitely need a striker. We definitely. I think.
Can I throw you in a wee centre back as well?
Probably a centre back.
8 of those.
This is getting like. Remember when you were a wee guy and you used to just circle things in the Argos catalogue for your Christmas and add it to your mom. It was like half the catalogue was. You'd throw it back at you. So this Celtic Christmas list is getting like.
You've got a load of stuff in there you don't use. That's all going in the bin.
So I think we need a striker because I think Celtic should always have 2 competing strikers, 2 strikers that can come in and come out. We had that with Yakimakis. Fine. He wanted to go. He wanted to play football. That's okay. But the step down from Kyogo to O for me is just too much. And it'd be good if Kyogo could we get some new batteries for Kyogo. That would be good for Christmas. Stephen, Champions League. 46 quid.
Can't wait.
46 quid for a meaningless, pointless game against Feyenoord. I mean, the club don't. Why should we waste podcasting time and energy talking about games and taking it seriously? That the club don't even give a shit about.
No, I know, and it's like, see if it wasn't for Kilmarnock, see if it wasn't for that game, we would have maybe come into this podcast thinking, Joe, this is a good opportunity to get the monkey off the back, get a positive result in Europe. We don't need to hear about that winless run of potentially 16 games now, haven't won at home for 10 years. But I don't care about any of that now. I just want it over and done with, because I said a few weeks ago before I think it was after the Atletico hammering, that I think, right, even if we do win a game now, we still had Lazio in final to go. Even if we do win a game now, what does it actually prove?
Progress. Progress, mate. Better points.
Yeah,
better points than last season.
So it's a dead rubber for both teams.
So see if Celtic win. See if Celtic beat Feyenoord, right? That means that we've got more points than we did last year.
Double the points.
Double the points that we got last year in a harder tournament, which means we're actually better than last year, which means everything we've spoken about and moaned about is irrelevant.
Well, I'd probably argue that last season was harder than this right now.
Definitely.
But it's double the points. Facts, absolute facts. We have progressed. We have made our mark in Europe. We have won the first game in 10 years, or won the first home game in 10 years.
Pathetic.
But yeah, I just want out the way now. That's sad, to be honest. I know we're joking about it, being quite flippant about it, but it's a sad state of affairs that we've got to this. A tournament that we were so excited about going into it. Brilliant. We gather for the draw and live react to it and all that. Get 5 games in and we can't be bored with the 6th one. We've all paid for our passes and all that, all paid for our packages. And, who could even be bothered going? Attendance wasn't great against Hibs, but that's to be expected. It's freezing cold in the middle of December and all that. So who knows who's going to turn up for this? I know people will probably feel obliged because they've already paid for it, but I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if you just took it off, to be honest.
I mean, it's so needless. I mean, you want to go and you want to support the team and all that, but you just feel like you're getting nothing back, and that's. No, I mean, we'll be there, obviously, and we'll do the match at the match podcast if you want to listen to that one after. I mean, you never know. It might be
we've hyped it up.
Might be an absolute mauling for Celtic here. They might batter Feyenoord, who knows? But
they might send out a reserve team because they've got nothing to play for as well. Why would they bother?
Do you know what?
Why would they take it seriously?
Honestly, see if we do win this game, right? If we do win it, one thing I don't want ever thrown at me is hoodoo's over. We won a game in
that's the whole thing. Yeah,
we've won a game in the Champions League. The hoodoo's over. It's now only 0 days since our last bullshit.
It's a tough one to get up for, isn't it? It's the Champions League, and this is how we're treating it. It's a game we could really do without. And I look at it going, do you know what? Just play the reserves. That's what we're basically doing now. And those guys that played on Saturday, I would punish them by playing them again, make them play again and make them play better. It's unbelievable how poor that was. Rub
their nose in it, make them smoke all the cigarettes in the packet.
Go and play against better players and see how you do. But at the same time, I'm like, what are we going to learn from that Phillips playing? The only thing that possibly him playing could do is mean Carter Vickers will be ready for the weekend, hopefully, because if there's any risk in him, I don't think that it's worth taking. We need to see some changes. We need to see some improvement. And look, as sad as it is to say, up the work rate and don't get pumped. That's all I want. And that feels like the COVID season.
Let's see if they live up to those incredibly low standards, that incredibly low bar that you've set for them. Let's see if they walk right up to it and just trip over it.
Get the finger out, Brendan.
I thought we'd end on a fun little quiz.
Oh, you ruined it. Right, okay, go for it.
Just to sort of break up the moaning a little bit. Right. Now, we find ourselves in mid-December 2023, almost 2024 now. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Wow. Right.
So we find ourselves at this time of year. Quite a long time since this person has scored a goal for Celtic. Okay. But we find ourselves in December 2023 picking Mikey Johnston to get his results in crucial league games now in the midst of some bad form. Thought we'd play a little quiz in some world events that have happened before or after Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic. So I'm going to give you a series of events. And
when was his last 29?
Not telling you. That's
the
part
quiz.
of it. Yep, that's part of it. So you need to guess if these massive events have happened before or after Mikey Johnston, current Celtic footballer, current Celtic starter, his last goal.
Right.
So an easy one to kick us off, right? So shout out your answer and do shout out mine.
Okay.
The UK's first recorded case of COVID-19, was that before or after?
After.
It was after. It was 30th of January 2020. So you know how 3 years or 2.5 years of lockdown, eat out to help out, doing that one-way system in supermarkets.
Yeah, no music in bars.
Yeah, you had to wear a mask unless you were dancing or going to the toilet. All of that came and went since Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic, okay? Hollywood icon of the 1940s, and 1950s, Kirk Douglas died. Was that before
Must
or
have been
after?
before.
After?
It was after. The 103-year-old actor died in January 2020, just after Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, is released.
That was definitely after.
After. It was about 3 weeks after Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic. Two more.
Right.
President Donald Trump is impeached for the first time over soliciting foreign interference into the US presidential election. So remember all that stuff with Russia and Putin and all that. Was that before or after Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic?
That's after, isn't it?
It was after. He was impeached on the 18th of December 2019, and that's more recent than Mikey Johnston's last goal for Celtic. And finally, Greg Taylor signs for Celtic.
That must have been before.
So Greg Taylor goes on to make 150 appearances, wins 3 leagues and a treble. Was that before or after Mikey Johnston?
That is surely before Mikey Johnston.
I signed that season, did he?
It's before by about 10 weeks. So 150 appearances for Greg Taylor later. That's all happened since Mikey Johnston's last goal.
So by that reckoning, Greg Taylor in that time has scored more goals for Celtic than Mikey Johnston has.
Significantly more, yes.
Unbelievable. And on that bombshell, we shall wrap up. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week.